of the Planning Committee of the students and faculty, as well as the Institute on National Affairs, which is funded by the government of the student body. Institute of National Affairs is also hosting a number of other activities throughout this week and speakers, and I'd like to highlight a few of those for you right now. Tomorrow, there'll be a lecture on the decline of the education in the age of management. There'll also be a panel on the consultants in education, as well as a lecture on how to destroy the First Amendment in the name of diversity. Those are a few of the activities planned for tomorrow. You are invited and welcome to attend any and all of those that you can. I guess next I'd like to point out the George Washington Carver exhibit, which will be on display throughout the week, which has been brought to us through the support from the Iowa Humanities Board, the ISU Alumni Association, the government of the student body, and the George Washington Carver Steering Committee. It will be touring the state in celebration of the centennial of Carver's enrollment here as the first African American student and faculty member. This year's institute is dedicated to George Washington Carver's life and work. I guess with that, I'd like to introduce our main speaker for this evening, Mr. Jim Hightower. Mr. Jim Hightower has twice been elected and served 8 years as the Commissioner of the Texas Department of Agriculture, where he established international marketing initiatives, agricultural processing projects, and farmer cooperatives, which especially benefited Black and Hispanic farmers. He has also served as the President of the Texas Consumer Association, co-founded the Agribusiness Accountability Project, and edited the nationally respected Texas Observer. His books include Eat Your Heart Out, Food Profiteering in America, and Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times, a report on America's land-grant colleges. He continues to speak out as a national spokesperson for the populist and progressive policies that benefit the working people of our country. Would you please help me welcome Mr. Jim Hightower?
Thank you very much, Brad, for those warm words, and all of you for the warm welcome for a scrawny Texan to come here to the winter in Ames, Iowa. I don't know what it means that we would be called together in the sunroom in the dark of the night. Perhaps enlightenment must come from within, I suppose, and we will try to do a little bit of that here tonight, not from me, but from you. I really want to offer just a little bit of fodder on the ground here for you to mull over in the next few minutes, but really to get to the questions that you might have on your minds. Be mercifully brief with you here in my opening comments. A preacher friend of mine taught me many moons ago the 3 B's of speaking. He said, be speaking, be brief, and be sitting down. And that's what I'll try to do with you tonight at Iowa State. I am truly honored to be asked to participate in this intellectual discourse and 6-day hog calling contest that y'all are having here on the very worthy topic of higher education in a democracy. I congratulate the students who formulate these programs on their choice of such an introspective and self-challenging subject. You know, if you're going to fix the world, you ought to start in your own backyard. I remember I see enough old heads out there that will know what I'm talking about here back during the 60s when we were going to go save the South in the civil rights movement. And a lot of us white kids would go down there and we'd say, how can we help? And they would say, go home and talk to your parents. We would say, oh God, anything but that. So let us march. But here you are in Ames talking among the family. And doing what I think higher education in a democracy really is supposed to do for the larger society, and that is to question authority, as that old bumper sticker says, and challenge assumptions, and to seek alternatives. As one who has been a rather notorious critic of land-grant colleges in the past, I do appreciate, by the by, the Iowa State hierarchy letting me come into Ames without having me dipped at the border first, courtesy that won't go unremarked. But in fact, I understand that some 20 years ago when Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times came out, that an administrator then here said that that book had driven him crazy, but I understand that was a short trip for him anyway, so we didn't worry too much about it. And there's been a lot of water and old administrators, I guess, under the bridge since then. My assignment tonight in this distinguished lecture series is to address education for the people, which is just broad enough to hide a wealth of ignorance on my part. But it does, just in the title, restate that old 1860s notion in the establishment of the land-grant college system, a system that was founded, by the by Abraham Lincoln and the Congress at that time, that this system was to be a group of little d democratic institutions scattered across the land to provide hands-on learning to help ordinary people do extraordinary things. And that's really all it's about. To extend that Lincoln reference about as far as it can possibly be stretched, I do believe that land-grant colleges can only provide education for the people if at the same time they are institutions of the people and by the people. I see some of you kind of shaking your head and dozing off there saying, what's he talking about? What did he say? Well, I'm saying that any institution anywhere, public or private, will rationalize its every action, no matter how whorish it might be to the most self-serving of special interests, as being for the people. Remember that ours is a government, the United States government, that lined up school children in the 1950s in Nevada to watch atomic bomb blasts to show that it was safe exercise for the people. So there's nothing too low for institutions to stoop to. Education for the people in a democracy implies full and open participation by the people. In other words, doing what you do with people rather than to people, as we did in the case of those students we lined up in Nevada. More specifically, that might mean designing courses with students, as some institutions in the land-grant system now do. It might mean creating farmer-scientist research teams, for another example, such as your very pioneering and important Leopold Center here has forged with practical farmers of Iowa, as opposed to impractical farmers of Iowa, correct? And for a third example, it might mean establishing an agriculture technology and family farm institute, as the Wisconsin legislature did last year, to allow farmer, consumer, and environmental groups to come together to shape and direct agricultural research and technological research, giving direction to the scientists rather than taking the result of scientists, whether we want it or not. Well, let's talk about what we might not want. As negative examples, I think of Cornell in Wisconsin participating with Monsanto Chemical Company to test bovine growth hormones over the opposition of farmers and consumers alike who don't want a conglomerate system of dairies on drugs. Just say no, it would seem to me, would be a possibility there for land-grant colleges. Nor do I think that land-grant colleges have any business participating in industry propaganda campaigns, and I can reach no further than my own state there, to Texas A&M's rather shameless study in 1990 by Ron Knutson, funded by chemical and synthetic fertilizer corporations, trying to denigrate the study by the National Academy of Sciences on alternative agriculture. Not to be outdone by their effort last year, this year, our own institution down there is launching a new propaganda assault, teaming up with food processors and food packers, trying to tell the public that the number one food safety issue in America is whether cooks handle the food properly in the kitchen. Never mind the possibility of pesticide residues, never mind the dangers of irradiation, never mind the matter of additives and steroids and other implants. Kind of akin to chemical companies back in the 1970s, you might remember, launching anti-litter campaigns as a solution to our environmental programs. They're using the legitimacy of land-grant college institutions and researchers and staff, and most importantly students, to cover up the very real problems that we need to be facing head-on in this society. And they can put all kinds of ribbons and packaging around it, but it's kind of like putting earrings on a hog. It just doesn't hide the ugliness that is down under there. It doesn't matter what kind of an institution stands up and says it doesn't matter. People know better than that. Well, I know from my own experience in institutions, including some that I've headed, that there is an inclination to drift along, to kind of stick with the status quo, to do what it is we know how to do what it is we know we can get paid to do. But it seems to me that the public role, institutions such as Iowa State University, is to foster the change that the society clearly wants. A good example right today in agriculture is the movement towards sustainable agriculture, not merely lessening the amount of chemicals that are used in agriculture production, but also paying attention to the appropriate crops for a region, a locality, tending to the soil itself, building its strength and its nutrient health, making sure that the water and the air are protected, but not only environmental viability, but also taking care for economic viability. It is no good to have a strong environmental system if there is not a possibility for family farmers to make money from that system. We must couple the environment with the economy and not let forces of greed and ignorance and arrogance try to divide us on that issue, because there's no need to do that at all. And we need to be looking toward what the public wants to move to, sustainable agriculture in this case, as opposed to just going along with what is. The status quo, as a rancher out in West Texas told me, status quo, Hightower, is Latin for the mess we're in. People know what's going on out there, and they're willing, they're eager even, to reach out to new ways. Consumer demand in agriculture is very obvious. We want less chemical contamination. We want better treatment of the environment in our agriculture production methods. We want more benefits for the farmers in terms of a market economy delivering for them. But at the same time, we have farmers in exactly that same attitude. After all, it is farmers who are on the land, right? They're right there with that water. And they're sitting around that kitchen table in the morning. And they're saying, now what is this you're going to go spray today? Didn't we do about 10% less of that this year, and now you've got to put that dosage on? What does that mean? And why do we have to do that? And what's the added cost this year? The added cost in terms of economics, but also the added cost in terms of exposure to your family, your children, and even old Spot out there running around the yard. Farmers paying attention to what they're doing and thinking maybe there's a better way to do it. It is the role of public institutions, such as Iowa State University, to empower these people, to be a catalyst of change for the change that they are clearly saying that they want to make. William Jennings Bryan, about 100 years ago, said destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's not something to be awaited, it's a thing to be achieved. We need to be on the side of the achievers. And the good news is there are achievers all over this country saying we'll do this if we get the kind of classic land-grant college support that this system was designed to provide. Tax your patience just a moment here for some examples in my home state. We tried to encourage our farmers and ranchers to diversify their agriculture production, not to get out of old fat beef cattle, but also to maybe get into some exotic game and some wine grapes and some blueberries and some organic production, some Christmas trees, some fish farming. Just a wide range of commodities that they could get into. A group down in southwest of San Antonio in a hilly area in Medina County and around Kerrville, a beautiful area of our state, began to develop an apple industry. And we were told in Texas, no, that's way too south. It's too warm down here, you can't do apples. But this is a high altitude. Turns out they have a 200 day a year apple growing season. No place in the United States has anything like that. They have it, and they're able to do it without any chemical use at all right now, without any. They don't know if they can keep on doing that, but they're proceeding from that attitude and that perspective. Let's begin without the chemicals and then add what we have to have as we move along. They went to the Extension Service and said, could y'all help us out? We need this particular research. They've got about 14 varieties of apple, some of the exotics, the Fuji's and the Anna apple and the Gala apples and some of these delicious products, premium price in the market for these things. The Extension Service said, get out of here. You guys are turkeys, man. This isn't an apple-growing country. We don't do apples here. Besides, that's not even agriculture. They took a hike. They ended up having to hire a guy out of West Virginia to come down there, out of their own pocket, who was kind of Mr. Apple in West Virginia, and work with them. And sure enough, they're going to have a whole new industry for the state of Texas. We're talking about something on the order of $50 to $75 million, depending on how many of these varieties work out. A real substantial piece of change down in that country. A whole new industry that could be developed, and it was stiffed by what is supposed to be the people's institution in agriculture. I think up in the high plains of my state, in the Panhandle area, of a guy named Gary George, a very, very big farmer up there, rancher, raising cattle and wheat, 7,000 acres, so big he is voting Republican up there. And Gary came to us. We didn't check anybody's voter ID, and came to us and said, Lord have mercy, I'm losing money on every square inch here. I hear y'all are willing to work with people who might try to diversify into something. What would make sense? And we said pinto beans. And the reason we said pinto beans is because we are the champion pinto bean eater in the world. We consume something like 150 million pounds of pinto beans a year. We have three cultures, black, Southern Anglo, and Mexican American, for whom the pinto bean is a staple of our diet. I grew up with pinto bean sandwiches. You cannot eat a burrito without the pinto bean on it, and on the side of the barbecue is always the pinto bean. I've been to white tablecloth restaurants, as they're called in Dallas, Texas, and eaten pinto bean pate, and live to stand before you today to tell about it. It is a commodity upon which we rely in our state, yet we were producing not a single one pinto bean for commercial sale in the state of Texas 4 years ago. Didn't make any sense at all. So we say to Gary George, pinto beans. He puts in 400 acres of them. We go down to Arrowhead Mills, buyer of organic pinto beans. They buy every one that he produces. He makes $200 an acre profit that year, votes Democrat in the next primary. But that's not an important thing. That's neither here nor there. The important thing is that now we have a pinto bean industry in that region of our state. 17 farmers in Ochiltree County, where Gary started this. We've got probably about 100 farmers now producing pinto beans. It's a 90-day crop. If your wheat gets hailed out, you can come in right behind it with pinto beans. It's a nitrogen fixating legume. It is good for the soil. It makes all kinds of sense. We have the markets established. We're not putting anybody out of business to do it. It works. Now we have 4 pinto bean processing facilities in that region of the state, so we went from nothing in 1988 to now in 1990 last year, 3 years' time really, it had become a $29 million a year crop. That is bigger than orange and grapefruit industry in the state of Texas alone. That happened in 3 years. He went to the Extension Service in Texas A&M and said, we got these little spot problems on these pinto beans, need a little bit of help. And they said, get out of here. We don't do pinto beans. You want pinto bean help, you go to Montana or someplace like that. Doesn't make any sense at all. Doesn't make any sense not only for agriculture and the overall economy and the consumer, it doesn't make any sense for Extension and our land-grant college system to be doing that. They're meanwhile down at the legislature in the United States Congress whining, my Lord, we need more money. You're cutting us off. Well, they need to be on the side of people who are moving toward the future. Rather than drifting back in the headwaters of the past. Talk about something really radical, go to a land-grant college down in Texas and say the word organic, and people just scatter. like we dropped a roach bomb on them there or something. They're out of there, can't spell it, can't pronounce it. Well, they want to make fun of it, like Knutson's little study that he did mocking the thing, saying, well, it's going to cut your yield if you go, and of course their study was based on 100% organic. If the world goes 100% organic tonight, half of the world is going to starve tomorrow. Of course nobody's talking about going 100% organic tomorrow, but we did introduce them to a fellow out in Muleshoe, Texas, a guy named Jim Crawford, a traditional farmer, graduate in animal science at Texas Tech University, went into farming in 1972, traditional method, applying the synthetic fertilizers, applying the chemicals on the application schedule given to him by his banker, by the chemical salesman, and by the extension agents. He was doing what he was told to do. By 1984, he was on the verge of going under with his farm. Good farmer, productive, innovative, cared, was involved. Began to think back, well, now, wait a minute, there's got to be another way to do this. I'm going to lose my farm. Began to look at the expense side of the ledger and saw that chemical cost and thought, well, maybe I could do less of this. And remembered that Mama and them back over in East Texas didn't use any of this. But it wasn't a matter, of course, of just going back to what Mama and them, let's just not use any chemicals. It's a matter of doing the study. What bug works against another? What is the tilth of the soil? How do we build this, and what are the nutrients that are necessary? So he began to study it and study it and study it. And he made a decision in 1984 to try to go not just less chemical use, IPM, but to go organic. This is not a balloon flying hippie, Jim Crawford. This is a guy with 900 acres of corn and cotton that he is raising out there. Good heavy boots, good strong mustache on him. Nothing wrong with Jim Crawford. He's not trying to raise tofu and make a point here. He's trying to feed a family. And Jim Crawford decided, I'm going organic. And sure enough, the first year, just as Ron Knutson had promised, first year he got half the yield on that corn that he had been getting. But he was doing something that Knutson hadn't figured on. He was taking some of that manure that we got beaucoup of piled up all over the high plains of Texas out there and putting that into the soil and plowing it into that soil. And it began to gain a little bit of strength, and he was rotating his crops. And sure enough, in the second year, he was 70% of the yield he had. And by the third year, he was 100% of the yield that he had been getting. And last year, 1990, he was 150% of the yield that he had been getting and that his neighbor got right across the road from him. And he used 1/3 less water than he had been using on that corn, and he got 1.5 times the price on the organic corn that he had been getting on a regular corn. Jim Crawford's on that farm at Muleshoe, Texas tonight because he dared to take a risk and get out there, yet the land-grant college system won't even say the word of what he is practicing. Jim Crawford is not a big fan of the land-grant college system as a result of that. That is doing damage to a very important system in our society, is my basic message. This is not a matter of us asking a system to commit suicide. It's a matter of asking a system to get on the side of the people who really are our future in agriculture and the overall economy. The ordinary people who are doing the extraordinary things out there. You abound in them right here, the practical farmers, Prairie Fire, the Thompson Farm, Dixon and Linda Terry, people who truly are pioneers. Work with these people who have the gumption and the genius, who have the real need for our help, after all. They don't have deep pockets. They don't have other products that they can charge their work off to. They're not in this to drive competition out of business. These are people who will deliver public benefits. And I mean work with all the people. We're no longer in a position where we can say to a significant percentage of our society, you don't count, we're not going to mess with you, y'all are going down anyway. For example, black farmers, or in my state, Mexican-American farmers. There was an attitude that, oh well, these are kind of small operators and we need to do reports on that counts them as they go out of business, the decline of the minority farmer in our society. We got involved with these farmers when we were it's first starting down there, and we found that sure enough the genius and the gumption was there, just as you should assume that it would be. An example is a guy named Roosevelt Guillory. Roosevelt's a black man outside of Beaumont, Texas, in the rice-growing region. Third generation farm family down there. Roosevelt is illiterate, meaning he cannot read or write, but that does not mean he cannot think, and it does not mean that he cannot farm. He's very good at both of those things. And he came to one of our black farmers conferences, one of our direct marketing conferences, and began to work with us and think maybe there's a way that this could plug in. And the whole notion of those meetings were to help people who were enterprising just get plugged into the system. We weren't giving them money. This isn't a welfare project. We were just helping plug enterprising people into a system. And we linked Roosevelt Guillory, Raisin Rice, into a guy named Ralph Velasco over in San Antonio, Texas, who owned something called Amigo Foods, a Mexican-American food specialty company, who had just come out with a new product. It was a product of Spanish rice, and on a little can of that, and on the top of it was a can of salsa, and you just dumped both of them into a skillet, and you had dinner right there on the table. The problem was the Spanish rice was coming from California, and costing Ralph really more than he wanted to pay. So we introduced Ralph to Roosevelt right across the state there. And they got together where Roosevelt had been getting, he was getting 7.5 cents on his rice that cost him 13 cents to produce, which is why he was in danger of going out of business, if you just do a little math right there. And we introduced him to Ralph, and they cut a deal, and Ralph bought his rice for his new Spanish dinner concoction there from Roosevelt, not paying 7.5 cents a pound, not paying 13 cents a pound, paying 19.5 cents a pound. And that was about a $150,000 deal for Roosevelt, and it kept that family in the rice business, a family that he has 2 sons and a daughter in that family farm operation. Just makes sense. We had Cambodian farmers in Houston, Cambodian and Thai farmers who were refugees at about the mid part of the 1980s, suddenly swarm into Houston. There's about, depending on whose count you're looking at, from 100,000 to 350,000 Asian Americans now living in Houston, Texas, refugee settlement programs. Many of these folks are farmers. They're on welfare. They don't like being on welfare. They want to farm, but there they are in Houston. So we got the land commissioner of our state to make available some land at $1 a lease program that wasn't being used for anything in Harris County, in Houston, Texas, that they could go farm, raising Cambodian vegetables. Hey, they knew how to do that, didn't they? They knew about the seed. They knew about how to do it. What they needed, though, was a little bit of research help on the soils and the climate of Texas. And Texas A&M said, we don't do that. We don't have that expertise, and you'll have to go elsewhere to get it. These folks got stiffed. Doesn't make any sense at all. An opportunity, by the by, for a land-grant college that is at the Texas legislature saying, we need your help, a Texas legislature that is now dominated by members from urban areas, the largest of which is Houston, Texas, to be able to tie in and say, we've done something for you. A change, by the by, that with the movement of Charlie Arntzen, the new Chancellor for Agricultural Programs at Texas A&M, they're now making. Changes are happening in that institution. They're beginning to understand these opportunities to side with people and get well by doing well, basically. It's really not even a matter of money in most of these cases. I think most of y'all know. Little dad's some money. The Leopold Center, I don't know what the total cost of the Leopold Center is, but it's not a pittance. Yet you've got a governor here, I understand, who wants to whack back on that and pick the bones of something that is tremendously productive. Not only for Iowa, the rest of the country looks to the Leopold Center. It's a model of what we want to achieve. We need that kind of program to be in place, but it's not a matter of much money that we're even talking about. Rather, it's a matter of attitude. Are we going to continue to try to pursue an economics of trickle down, which we've been under now for 11 years? Not even damp out here in the countryside waiting on trickle down to come our way, because they took the money and ran, didn't they? Into junk bond ventures, into savings loan bailouts. Now the banks are lined up saying, man, we need to get $38 billion, and while you're at it, we need to be able to move into insurance and securities. If you can't make money banking where people come and give you money, then how are you going to make money in insurance? I don't know, but nonetheless, that's another point. That's a diversion. The point is that instead of trickle down, we need to be involved in a percolate up economy, investing in people at a grassroots level, investing in Jim Crawford, investing in Gary George and his pinto beans, and Baxter Adams and his Medina apples, and those families who are out there, investing in the people, in the practical farmers here in Iowa, investing in ordinary people because they are the ones who do the most extraordinary things. You don't see them holding Iowa hostage, as IBP's president came to Des Moines just recently to say, if you people don't shape up, I'm going to ship out. Turns out we were giving them $9 million out of taxpayers' pockets here in Iowa. A guy making $2.3 million a year in personal income, saying we're not doing enough for him. I mean, he's got a black belt in whining, it sounds like to me. It's not the conglomerates that are going to do this for us. They do it to us more often than not. We need to be investing in the people at a grassroots level who will deliver for the larger society, that our investment means something. That is what the whole land-grant college system, the Hatch Act, and the research system, and the extension system were put in place to achieve. There are many, many examples out there, including right here, including your Leopold Center, of where that is working very successfully. We just need a whole lot more of it. And I would say to land-grant administrators, don't be afraid to get on the side of the radicals and the rowdies and the rabble-rousers out there. That's what they called Edison. That's what they called Leonardo da Vinci. We need to be on the side of people who may not always be in the mainstream. Because we got a lot of farmers who are drowning in the mainstream, don't we? The role of leadership is not to float on that main street. And thank God I'm a country boy. I mean, the role of leadership is to try to widen the mainstream and deepen it. So there's more opportunity for individuals and families and communities to prosper in our society. We're hearing now from Congress that this is the way they want us to go, by the by. You know, a sustainable agriculture research and training program was put in place in the 1990 Farm Bill. And in fact, there was an organic certification program put in place by that Congress over the objections of the administration, over the objections of the chemical lobby, over the objections of the House Agriculture Committee itself. The first time ever that an amendment in my lifetime, my memory, that an amendment was passed on the floor of the Congress over the objection of the Agriculture Committee happened, and it happened on organic and sustainable agriculture issues. There's a message whispering through the wind here to all of us in this, that this is a way to go that makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that everybody comes forward with is going to work, but it means that we need to be listening to that, and that's a direction that we should be heading in. Mostly, it is a matter of listening to the people themselves. I'll leave you with this thought and get to your question. There's a moving company in Austin, Texas, that has an advertising slogan that we sort of adopted in our Department of Agriculture during my 8 years that kind of sums up the attitude I'm talking about. This moving company in the Yellow Pages has an ad that says, if we can get it loose, we can move it. That's really all we're talking about. Get it loose at a grassroots level, and the people move this economy for themselves. Thank you very much for having me at this level. Okay, let's get on it here. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about your radiation? We're supposed to become one of the 13 centers doing that.
Oh, is that right?
Who is it for?
Well, I mean, I think you're answering your own question without need for me to really elaborate much on it, and I won't. I don't know enough personally about the science of irradiation to say this is good or bad. But I do know that it's another incident, including so much of the biotech research that is underway right now, that is preceding public consensus. And we are in very grave danger in this democracy, in so many areas of our society, of government movements that do not consult people. This is not something that the market wants, and by market I don't only mean consumers, but I mean retailers and many milk processors even want. It is certainly not anything that farmers are demanding. It is not anything that seems to achieve any economic benefit that is going to be passed on to consumers. So what is the purpose of it? And if it is so beneficial, it would seem then to be worthy of a full-fledged public discussion before we spend so much public money in it.
Jim, what farmers used to fight
to do sustainable agriculture, at least in some run, the short run or the long run or something, except for these people in the niches. Why aren't we talking about prices, prices that are needed to do sustainable agriculture?
I think we do have to do that, and I think we do have to provide transition support for farmers who want to make the move into sustainable, and I mean not only the hands-on research, which is so essential. I had a farmer from Bonham, Texas come up to me and say, I agree with you, I'm using too many of these chemicals, I'm worried about it, but I don't know how to farm that other way. This is a guy basically my age, young, very young, who doesn't know how to do it, and that's why we need this hands-on kind of effort out there. We spent 40 years, at least since about 1948, creating the agriculture production system that we have now and financing system that we have now and marketing system of public policy and public funding getting us to this point. If the larger public, consumers, environmentalists and others, now want a different kind of a system, then we have to invest in that. And I think that investment has to include price, as you were talking about, and has to include support for a transition period of a farmer. Jim Crawford was lucky to have the resources and the intelligence really to be able to make a very quick adjustment. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. We did try to put into the Farm Bill, and Jim Jontz of Indiana carried a part of this, a 5-year transition provision. In my view, it's not unlike what this society invested in the 1970s through energy rebates, saying that we wanted more efficient air conditioners and refrigerators and et cetera, and therefore city governments were using public money to give you $25 or $250 rebate depending on how efficient your energy system was. This is a very similar thing. Now you cannot go to the store and buy an inefficient energy using refrigerator or air conditioner. We changed the entire industry in that process in a very short period of time. And that's why I think we've got to talk about this same kind of transition period, dealing with price and loan rates and that sort of thing for farmers who want to make it in the short run. And by the way, that doesn't mean that we ignore farmers who are out there right now dealing with corn and soybeans and cotton and wheat and those basic staple commodities. Instead of continuing the deathly pursuit that we've had really since 1973, including one Democratic administration of knocking farmers' prices down, we need to shore those prices back up.
Do you see an alternate crop coming into Iowa other than corn and beans, such as alfalfa, which is a cover crop which we planted for? There's less chemicals needed, and it also fixes nitrogen. Is there anything else that farmers could produce at a competitive level?
Well, I'm a stranger in these parts, and I'm not going to tell you what it is you ought to be shifting to, but I think that is the attitude that you should have. You should be asking your own agriculture department and Iowa State University officials, and most importantly farmers themselves, what alternatives would be possible here that would diversify each farm and ranch. It's not a matter of diversifying your state agriculture. We're a fairly diversified agriculture in Texas. We go from citrus in the valley, a semi-arid and semi-tropical area, to hard winter wheat on the high plains, a cold and dry region of our state. But each farm and ranch is dependent on a couple of commodities. And what we're saying is they need to have 6, they need to have 8 that cover them in that time period. So that attitude that you're raising is the proper one. I don't have the answer of what ought to be done here in Iowa.
As a family farmer who rotates, it's all well and good to rotate, but what do we do about the insidious actions by GATT, free trade zones that destroy and import? I raise oats, and yet I can't get a fair price. I'm getting 90 cents for my oats. They should be around 3 1/4. Then I hear that they're importing 50 million bushel oats from Sweden. I can't compete with that.
Yeah. Well, you're raising a real important point, and is I don't have anything more than a glib answer to you, but it is really a fundamental point that I would make to you also, is not only are you a farmer, but you're a citizen of this country, and we've got to begin to take control back of our own government. When you have Carla Hills and Clayton Yiter in Geneva and in Brussels, saying that we're putting forward a GATT proposal that will knock down the world price on all commodities that we produce in our country beneath even what we now receive for them, which is at best half of production costs, in the name of family farmers, without having ever come out here and talked to a family farmer and asked their participation. Then we do not have a democratic representation in Europe from our government's perspective. So we have got to try to take charge of that, and that's why we have fought in the Congress to take this Cargill's little pet toy, which is the GATT negotiation, off of the fast track in the United States Senate. You need to understand it's on a process called the fast track in the Senate, which is if they negotiate the treaty in Europe, the president reduces that to legislation, puts it before the Congress. The Congress essentially has 90 days to consider it. They can then cast one vote for it. No amendments can be made for it. You're either for it or you are against it. Again, that is an insult added to injury. It's an insult to our democratic process. So we asked some support last year for some senators to send a message to the GATT negotiators that we were not happy with what they were doing. We were at last beginning to pay attention to it, wanted off the fast track. We had hoped to get 15 or 20 senators to sign on to it. We got 37 to sign on to it. This year, Kent Conrad from North Dakota carried that legislation. This year, I think Fritz Hollings from South Carolina, a senior member of the Senate leadership, is going to be carrying it. But we have to be diligent in that fight, and just as you indicate, while we have our attention on Europe, we need to also be paying attention in Mexico, where our administration is down there saying we need a Mexico, U.S., Canada free trade agreement, again without consulting farmers and workers and environmentalists. We've got to pay attention.
Jim, you addressed production agriculture as taught in the Land Grant University. Would you address the teaching of economic theory and economics as it's taught in the Land Grant Section?
You're trying to get me assassinated before I leave here. Well, I don't know anything about your situation here. I talked about Mr. Knutsen's effort in my own state. I know I'll give just a little story of a lady who's been working with us for the last couple of years down in the Texas Department of Agriculture. She's from Nebraska. Her name's Barbara Meister. She went to the University of Nebraska, Land Grant College institution over there, to major in agriculture economics. She's the last sibling of several siblings in a family, and was the sibling that went through a troubled period in which the family was on the brink of broke and about to lose its farm. Went to the university there and found that there was no discussion at all about the farm crisis that was going on, no discussion at all about the need for prices for those commodities, no discussion at all about what was actually happening in people's lives. So had to, we're talking 3 years ago now, had to work with some people over there to establish, just as student leadership has organized this conference, to establish some I guess alternative courses that would begin to address that and bring in professors from other departments in the institutions. But we all get stuck in our ways, and by we I mean agriculture commissioners as well. This is a very slow world that I have been a part of, and I don't know if it's just institutional lethargy or what, but across the board, and that includes the Congress, a Democratic controlled Congress that just approved a 1990 Farm Bill, even though they were confronted face to face by farmers and by me and people like me to say, you are going to pass a bill that will eliminate 500,000 farmers in the life of this bill. And they said, yes, sir, that's what we're going to do. We're sorry about it, but that's what we're going to do because we don't, they tell us there's no money. And we said, what's that stuff they're bailing out the savings and loans with? Well, that's something else. So I think all of our, my point is not to pick on any one thing and not to come here at Iowa to insult my hosts. And that's why I've tried to give Texas examples and other examples. We have an institutional problem that our democratic public institutions are behind where the people are. And the people are moving, and they have to move, because what we're doing ain't working. Yes, sir.
There's a general theme here of making public institutions, and specifically land-grant universities, more accountable to the needs of the people. A few years ago, I believe the farmers in California had sued the university system. Did they win?
Yes. The question is, there's a general theme here tonight of making universities, particularly land-grant institutions, more accountable, that there had been a suit a few years ago in California by lawyers representing farmers. Actually, they were representing farm workers and farmers to require an accountability by land-grant institutions for the impacts of their research. They did win that lawsuit at a federal district court level, and there may be, I hope, people here tonight who know more than I do. That's about as far as I have tracked it. It obviously is on appeal at some level or other. That suit and just general demand did lead to new language in the research section of the 1990 Farm Bill that states specifically the technological mission of land-grant institutions must be to serve family farmers and workers in rural communities. So I don't know how that affects the suit, and I don't know the status of the suit, but it was a landmark piece of...
You have to go that far to get these institutions, including Iowa State, to be accountable and responsible in their land-grant commission.
Yes. He says the question is, we have to go this far. We have to file suit against land-grant colleges to get them to be accountable to what had been a fairly clear statutory mission that was laid out for them. And that is true, but it is not unique to land-grant colleges. I mean, we had to do the same thing on civil rights and continue to have to do the same thing. We have to do the same thing on environmental policies. The Congress last year passed the savings and loan bailout that mandated no redlining, that mandated the new institutions that were created by taxpayers' money to comply with the Community Reinvestment Act, that it had to comply with environmental laws, that it on and on. They have ignored all of that, and we're going to have to file suit to get there. It's what democracy is about. It doesn't mean you win when you win.
What sort of mechanisms do you see bringing farmers and researchers together to solve the problem?
I think you all heard that question, so I won't have to repeat it. I don't know. I mean, the Wisconsin model that